to Cover Story. Well, today we're going to go slightly off track and discuss an issue that in fact impacts all of us, the mental health and well-being. Now, this is an issue that has really come up in the limelight post-COVID when more and more people are coming out and talking about depression and other mental illnesses. But still, this word is still a taboo. For instance, I think at most 70% of people who suffer from mental health actually don't go out and ask for help because of the stigma and taboos that are associated with it. There is also another angle to it. With our lifespan increasing, our physical lifespan has increased, but with it, has the mental lifespan well-being kept up with it? Because more and more people that I know are talking about dementia, Alzheimer's, and various old age-related mental health diseases. How permanent are these? Does everybody get it? Are these genetic? Can these be controlled with medicine? Is mental health physical or psychological? These are some of the questions I'm going to be raising with my panel of experts. I have on the panel a neurologist and a psychiatrist. Joining me is Dr. Sameer Parekh. He's a director at the Fortis National Mental Health Program, Fortis Healthcare, and Dr. Rajshekhar Reddy. He's a senior director neurology at Max Healthcare. Dr. Reddy, if you take the last point first, has our mental age kept up with our physical age, really, to put it bluntly?
I think that's a very open-ended question. I could go on a little bit about that, Priya, but I think, when we talk about mental health, there are two aspects of it, and I'm going to start, and Dr. Sameer, of course, will take over so there are two aspects. One is we talk about the mind and the brain. So when you talk about these two things separately, as a neurologist, for me, mental health, the condition that I see with relation to mental health is predominantly dementia. Dementia is something which happens as we get older. Age is one of the biggest risk factors. But this is not to say that it is considered normal anymore. So even if a person ages and is forgetful, and we think that there is an underlying dementia, we do treat it. We don't accept it as a physiological process. We think it is a pathology. Now, it's been seen that about after the age of 65, about 15% people will get some forgetfulness, so some changes that predispose them to forgetfulness. At the age of 85, it increases to 50%. So you're right about the fact that as the population ages and as we get more people in this age group, we're going to have people with mental health issues such as dementia coming to us. Now, there are basically, of course, whenever we make a diagnosis such as dementia, we also need to make sure that nothing else is happening that is mimicking this condition. For instance, a person who's got a mood disorder, and again, Dr. Parekh will probably just tell us more about that, and is not registering anything that you tell them because their mind is so occupied or preoccupied with their the psychiatric ailment, so to speak. Then when you ask them questions later, it would appear that they are forgetful. But that is called a pseudo-dementia. So I'm just getting a little technical here, but just to say that before we make a diagnosis of dementia, which is basically forgetfulness for at least a period of 6 months, which is not explained by any other medical illness. For instance, if someone's been binging on alcohol every day, and then you ask them questions and they're not able to tell us what's happening, you cannot call that dementia, right? So you need to make sure that you're not missing any medical issues. And then after that, after excluding medical issues, and in most people, we do an MRI to make sure there's nothing else happening in the brain which is causing a problem. And then we call these people, then we say these people have dementia. So is our mental health keeping up with our physical health? As our quality of life improves, as we live longer, we're going to see more and more of this. This is a big burden in countries like Japan, for instance, where their longevity is a lot. So we see that happening in those kind of countries. Even in the US, we believe that women have more dementia than men there because they actually have a longer lifespan than men in the US. And there are certain hormonal changes also which play a role. But so there are so many things that come into play. And I think that, like I said, as we see more and more people in this age group, we're going to see more and more of this problem. Yes.
Dr. Parekh, will you come in? And but I've been hearing a couple of your lectures on TEDx also, so that's helped me understand the issue that is at stake. But like what Dr. Reddy says, sometimes it's the mood the person is in also, which means I guess if the person is going through depression, he or she won't be engaged, and so on and so forth. What are the various issues that you kind of deal with in terms of depression, in terms of anxiety?
So again, depression, anxiety would be two big different clusters.
Yeah,
let me give you this context. I mean, we are in the budget month. So let me give you a number perspective here, right? If you were to put cancer, diabetes, and chronic respiratory diseases on one side, and now you put mental health on the other side, without including the social cost, the economic cost of mental health is more. So that's a pause that the viewer needs to have.
Economic cost in terms of treatment or in terms of opportunity lost?
The cost to the economy, the world economy, right? So that's what one needs to understand. I mean, to give you an idea, $1 million is lost in productivity every year because of mental health conditions, because 15% of working adults at a given moment in time have a mental health concern. So when we talk about mental health, we'll also need to understand there are various aspects to it. Of course, depression being amongst the largest illnesses in the world, just under 300 million people, about 280 plus million people in the world suffer from depression, and the 230 plus million suffer from anxiety disorders. So that's the number we are looking at. So obviously, any person, be it a general physician, family physician, be it a neurophysician like Raj, be it a mental health professional like me, we will all see more of depression and anxiety because statistically that's more out there. And if you go by the 2022 WHO report, there has been a 25% increase just in the 2 years of the pandemic of depression and anxiety globally. So that's how it is. And yes, so depression can also have an impact that you may be a young person who's having depression and you may be having forgetfulness as a symptom. But obviously that will be very different to dementia, which, like Raj was saying, is an age-related problem. So one needs to see it in a different way. Children can have depression, geriatric population can have depression. But young people won't have dementia. But anxiety disorder spread across the span. So that's how you need to see this.
But also, how many people are coming out, Dr. Parekh, before I get back to Dr. Reddy? Are people becoming more aware of talking about it post-COVID?
So my take on this is that when I started, I was a student, about 25, 26 years old back. So if I just compare these 2.5 decades, of course, more people are talking about it. Of course, more people are coming out. I mean, obviously, goes without saying. Media, I think, worldwide, especially in India, has played a significant role. You pick up a magazine, you'll have a column or a quote of a psychiatrist. You pick up a news channel, the story could be anything, but you'll probably have a mental health connotation happening, so on and so forth. Now, whether you now use social media platforms and so on and so forth. So that has happened. Has COVID also brought more to the light mental health? Yes. Why? Because almost the entire population experienced distress at almost the same moment in time. Not depression or anxiety, but distress. So people realize reaching out to people, talking to each other, giving emotional support mattered. Having said that, even today, globally, about 75% of people are hesitant to seek help, don't seek help, who should have reached a professional. Various reasons, awareness being a big reason, taboo, stigma, discrimination, the perception of discrimination being another very big reason. Third aspect is excess. So in a country like ours, length and breadth of our country, if you just compare between, let's say, a developed country with a high-income country and a low-income country, the difference is remarkable. From 72 lakh psychiatrists in a high-income country, it comes down to 1 or 2 per lakh. So what happens is access is not.
Right.
What COVID did, and more importantly, what the government supported, was telemental health. Telemental health is the only solution for mental health in our country. Like it or not, that's the only way we can reach the length and breadth. Otherwise, how in a city like where we practice, let's say NCR, the number of psychiatrists and neurophysicians, just imagine the number. Now, how about talking about a few thousand miles away in some rural area? You won't get an expert.
Got it, huh?
So if you want them to access and get the intervention, access needs to reach there. And like I said, in a branch like ours, where physical examination is bare minimum, telehealth is the only solution.
Do you agree with that, Dr. Reddy, or would you prefer a physical examination for your patients in terms of dementia there?
So, Priya, again, we can divide this into a first visit and a follow-up kind of situation.
Yes.
So it's always important for us, as like Dr. Parikh was saying, that for psychiatry, they get a lot of information while speaking to the patient. And that also is something we see in neurology. Okay, we get a lot of information from what the patient tells us. So if a person is forgetful for 2 days and the same forgetfulness is there for 10 years, the implications of that and the diagnosis would be very different. So sometimes when you see a patient the first time, there are certain things that we see on examination. At the same time, I want to tell you that telemedicine has actually changed the way we look at things. So we do get a lot of information from patients. The family is quite happy to see a doctor, see that they've been able to show what they want to. And I would imagine that it's great value to see a doctor the first time, but follow-up certainly can be done via teleconsultations. And I think that way, this is like Dr. Parikh said, the reach has increased considerably. It is sometimes a little intrusive, I must say, that there are times when, you're wondering, what time of the day your work ends with this kind of thing. But yes, I must say that people are benefited. So this is something that will certainly go on, yes.
So we're a little more on dementia and treatment. If you can make up people, because as you were saying, this is something I think we'll have to deal with more and more as the physical lifespan increases. Can it be avoided? Is it hereditary? Is it our lifestyle choices? What causes it? I mean, the short answer.
Sure. So first of all, yes, there is a genetic predisposition to dementia. And there are certain genes that are associated with this, but I don't think there's great value in trying to test for these things and know you're going to have it. I also, in my experience, see that people who have longevity in their families will tend to have more dementia, because if you have a number of people in your family getting to 85 and 90, and statistically there's a higher risk of having dementia at that age, you will see more people with that kind of problem. Now, what can one do to avoid this? I think it's important to keep your brain working. It's like your body. So if you're going to physically exercise your body and stay fit, your brain should also be active. So I tell all my patients to make sure that they're doing brain games. I use this terminology, which is called brain games. So brain games includes playing cards, playing Scrabble, sometimes word jumbles, doing the crossword, doing Sudoku, any kind of thing where, at times just playing Ludo, snakes and ladders with grandchildren. Because even the effect of, or the effort of actually moving, throwing the dice, seeing what number it is, moving that number of squares, requires a certain amount of registration and processing. And that helps the brain function. So I keep telling people that you have to keep using your brain. The second thing I encourage them to do is to keep a diary. I tell everybody, write down whatever is happening through the course of the day. Sometimes mundane things like you've given someone a certain sum of money, you write that at the beginning of the day. On top of the diary, you have the date, which shows, for example, 1st of February, 2023. Then you put a second or a third point towards the end of the day. Your eye invariably falls upon what you've written earlier. So that sort of, rejigs your memory. It reinforces your memory. And every time you look at the diary, you've got this date on top. So I encourage people to use this, and it sort of gives them a little more confidence. Some people are hesitant. They think that they're going to become more dependent on that. But I keep telling them, look, it's a tool that will help you remember. It'll give you a little more confidence. And a small thing like, for example, having a digital clock in a room rather than a clock with an analog clock. Because when you look at that, you wouldn't know whether it's morning or evening. So if a person has a problem like this, then you keep a digital clock. It says 7:30 a.m. on 1st of Feb 2023. So that always helps them, it reinforces that, it tells them where they are. So, there are small things that one can do. And I think this is useful for everyone. So it's good for people who think they have a memory problem. It helps them also. So these are the various small things that one can do to try and make your brain a little sharper and not so-called to fall off the edge, so to speak.
Okay. But Dr. Bai, this is what we can do. What about society? There's you spoke earlier about the stigma and slurs that people, for instance, calling someone mad, psycho, has become like one should avoid all these words because this adds to the stigma to mental health.
While Raj was talking about the things we should do, and this is something we also tell. So a thought came to my mind that I was listening to the Prime Minister recently and was talking about how many Indian languages are there and why don't we learn one. And this is something that I have started telling people, frankly, I've started myself also, learn a new language.
Which one are you learning?
Which one am I learning? And I'm still trying to figure the difference between Malayalam and Tamil, but I'm trying to get a balance, and I do make my own mistakes, but I'm giving it a try. The whole idea behind this is you are trying to learn. Just understand this from a very simplistic, take a backseat. When we were students, when Raj continues to be young, but let's say when I was young, and I would have an exam to go and I could read so many books. Now to read one journal article takes a lot out of me. Why? Because I'm no more habituated to it. My wires are no more oiled. So when I learn, relearn, do these things, actually I'm stimulating. Very similar to like the body exercises that Raj was talking about. Coming to what you asked me, 2-3 things on my mind. I just start with media, frankly. I think portrayal of mental health in media has become better. It still has a bit of a way to go. Reflect on it, especially on entertainment media. How has mental health eventually been portrayed? They've used humor. When you use humor, you take empathy away, right? You bring mockery.
Right.
And that's where all these slurs come. Or they've used either violence or nowadays psychopathy. Some violent crime happens. One of the first things that people think about, is there a mental health problem also or not? So you're correlating, and now you're adding fear to it. Mockery or indifference and fear. Either ways, you're not going to help the person. Similarly, our language, the slurs, using words, and this is where mental health has struggled. So, for example, depression is also an English language word, right? So when I say depression, for me, it's a clinical illness which has a chemical imbalance which requires medications and therapy. But let's say if somebody else has read a novel and the word depression comes, they may see it in a very different way. So one needs to be careful about this. I also feel that in an era of social media, we will need to really think about the kind of information that's floating around. What hurts us is that things get highlighted, right? So for example, let's say somebody does a research with 60 people in one corner of the world and says, let's say antidepressants are not good, for some reason ends up saying it. That becomes a viral conversation. But the meta-analysis for decades and decades and empirical evidence and clinical evidence, which shows robust benefit, almost becomes a sidetrack and you're discussing something else. So both fake news and faulty recognition and highlighting or spotlighting of news which are not worthy, all of that is an issue. In modern day times, what has happened is anybody can say whatever they want. So people need to learn to be trained. So for example, if you are reading about, let's say, seizure disorder, epilepsy, and you are being told about a medication, you will go on Dr. Raj Shekhar Reddy's profile, or you'll read if he's written about that. You won't go to a cardiologist's profile, or you wouldn't come to me asking about which stent to use for cardiac. How would I know? Because there are subject matter experts. We need to train ourselves into asking this question. And portrayal of media, conversations on media like this one, need to be very consistent. And we need to remember that, let's say if you've done a story on dementia today or on mental health today, That doesn't mean that the tick in the boxes happen. You keep doing the same interview every 3 months also, it will still have new meaning because newer people will learn, and that's how the cycle goes. That's how I see it.
I hope you're committing to coming back to me in 3 months. I'm going to take a quick break and come back and talk to you about some of the stereotyping of the medications that are used. Are they lifelong? Are they have a sedative effect? People are very apprehensive of taking medication also. But after a quick break. Hello and welcome back to Cover Story. Today we're discussing mental health. We have on the show Dr. Rajshekhar Reddy and Dr. Sameer Parekh. Dr. Reddy, I'll bring this question to you first. In terms of medications, are they lifelong? Are they sedatives? Do they what are the other impacts that they have? Why are people apprehensive of taking medications for a mental health problem?
So I'm going to talk about basically the medications used for dementia, and I'll let Dr. Parekh talk about the ones that are used for psychiatric ailments. So for dementia, most of the medication that we use these days have been around for a fair bit of time. So what's been seen is that when we have mild or moderate disease, then these medications tend to have some benefit. When I say some benefit, I keep telling people, look, you have a problem, don't think you're going to get better. But I give them an example. I tell them that, look, if you're 75 years old, and by the time you get to 85, there's going to be some decline in mental function. Now, if you have a disease process, the decline is much steeper. The medication, when we give you for such a condition, is going to reduce that decline in terms of it not being that steep. But it's still going to be more than a person who does not have a condition like yours. So the first thing is to tell them, look,
it's not curable.
Correct. So it's not as though you start a medication, you tell them, look, in 3 months, it's going to be back to normal. If you don't set expectations right at the beginning, then it's a problem. They will not be compliant. Now, the other thing also is that people are concerned, look, at this age, should we take so many medications? I tell them that these diseases happen at this age. Most people have other comorbidities such as diabetes and blood pressure or heart disease and all that. And a lot of times they're using medication in that group of people. So you don't need to worry about that. Of course, we are monitoring for side effects, etc. You've got to also understand that some of these medications that are developed by big companies, they're not going to choose the worst case scenarios and give it to those people because you cannot show benefit in that group of patients. So when you want to use a medication, when they want a medicine approved, they're going to use it for mild to moderate disease. Because severe disease, eventually nothing works. Now, if I want my medicine to fail, I will try it in billions of very severely afflicted people. And so sure, it doesn't work and I'll lose several $1 billion of research. So you also need to tell people that don't wait till a point of time that you're so far ahead in the disease that doing something now is not going to help. For me, in dementia, I look at two aspects. I tell family members also, I have to explain to them, look, there are two aspects. One is the forgetfulness aspect, which is amnesia, the amnestic domain. And then you have the non-amnestic domain. A lot of non-amnestic symptoms could be related and actually are psychiatric manifestations of dementia. So people could be aggressive, agitated, they could have mood disturbances, they could have delusions and this and that. And so a lot of medications that we use for that are medications of the psychiatric spectrum. And again, in this group of people, because they're older, there's going to be slightly more risk of side effects, etc. So you've got to set the tone and tell them that this is what it is. Now, obviously, even in a country like ours, this is such a big issue. In a country like the US, where billions of dollars are lost in taking care of the elderly, and unlike us culturally, we don't have that much of family there taking care of them. So it's more important for them to have medication. And newer medicines have been approved. But unfortunately, even now, we don't have anything that is curative or has such dramatic improvements that people take. And a lot of people are willing to spend money. Some of these are very expensive also. But the routine medications, which have been available for over 20 years, the standard FDA-approved medications are available. They're safe. And we've been using them for quite a bit. And they're reasonably effective in at least a proportion of patients. So I always say, sorry.
And they're lifelong, sorry. I mean, obviously,
yes, so many of these medicines tend to continue till a long time, yes. And, unless a person has a problem, we wouldn't usually take it off, no.
Okay. Dr. Parekh, your take on the medicines for depression, because that people do go get on and off, they take it.
No, again, see, a generalized way to look at any treatment is not possible. But let me still try and give a perspective to this. If somebody would have had depression, mild to moderate depression, you would look at intervention through psychotherapy and use medication if need be. Moderate to severe, you will most definitely use medication. If it is first episode depression and other things are not there, then you are expecting that you will probably stop the medications after about a 6-odd month of symptom-free period, which is about 7-8 months of meds. If it is, let's say, multiple episodes, then the duration may become a bit longer. If it's much longer episode that has been there, then the duration of the treatment may also be impacted, or if there are some other factors. That's how you need to look at it. But one can safely say that the common myths around psychiatric medications, that medications once prescribed for a psychiatric condition are lifelong, is completely untrue. In fact, that's untrue for most cases. Similarly, all medications are sedatives is completely not true. Or medications will make you dependent, again, not true. Why? Ask a question why this happens. This happens because when did the first medication come in the world? In 50s. That's very recent, if you look at it like that. So initially, from chlorpromazine that started, which was seen as a wonder treatment for psychosis at that time, but had so many side effects, like oversedation, some other aspects. Similarly, the first antidepressants that came, the old tricyclics, again had a lot of side effects. Those medications are hardly being prescribed now. They are almost like in history textbooks. The medications now are for the ambulatory patient. I mean, no matter what branch you are in, what work you do, most people can take those medications and go about their job. You will be taking a sedative if sleep is actually a part of your illness. So if you come and tell me, I'm not sleeping well, doctor, for so many weeks, of course I'll give you something to put you to sleep. It's important for your well-being. But if you come and tell me that you have, let's say, some symptoms, and let's say it is the depression spectrum, but you do not have a sleep problem, you will not be prescribed a sleep medication. So you go for a medication to your physician for, let's say, an infection, but if you don't have fever, they will not give you a medicine to bring your fever down because your fever is normal. So that's how we need to look at it. And there are all sorts of myths which continue to be there. Factually speaking, the world has come a long way. And the newer medications are far more safer, well taken across the age group, from children to senior citizens with various comorbidity, neurology or cardiology and other comorbidities. And they have a remarkably good impact. And one thing that Raj as well said, and I want to re-emphasize that not just for dementia, but also for most mental health conditions, early intervention is the key.
Okay.
And why mental health? I think for anything in our life, early intervention is the key. It could be a social problem. It could be a personal problem. It could be a medical issue, whether it's gastro, neuro, diabetes, cancer, cardiac, psychiatry. How does it change anything? Early intervention, timely intervention will always give you better results.
Okay. On that note, in fact, we're hoping this show can be seen as a sort of early intervention, because we're going to try and hold more conversations like this. I know we've gone off syllabus for Cover Story, but I'm going to be raising issues like this which I think are of public interest and in the public domain, really. Thank you both for taking time out for this conversation.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.